go around here, and we're going to turn on the mic. Me and the microphone have kind of a love-hate relationship going on here. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So this last course that we're going to do, I designed for you because the theme originally was, how do we expand the chaplaincy that you already do? How do you maybe find some different pathways to engage in? And where can you go if some of the doors that were open before closed and maybe some others have opened up that were shut? And so what do we do now? And what we're going to talk about is the strategic planning part of a trauma response. And I do a lot of this with departments, agencies, because you can get a lot of training, but if you don't find a lot of training on actually how to develop a strategic response. So first I'm going to lay some quick pieces of thought for us. Then I'm going to give you a scenario, a real call-out scenario that I worked with, and I'm going to help you try to see maybe what we did. I'm not saying we did everything perfect. I have no illusion to that. Some of you are probably better at this than I'll ever be. But what I do want to say is many people don't consider who is doing the planning for the call-out that they go on. And what I want to do is I want to say, I would love all of us to get better at it, because that in itself is chaplaincy. And hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about as we continue on here. So the first one, I just want to start right with the basics. When we get a call-out, let's say you're the person who's going to receive a call-out. Maybe you're going to start your own chaplaincy pathway from this. You're going to come and say, HCMA, hey, I really want to start tow truck drivers chaplaincy. And we actually did that. We actually had one of our chaplains took that on. If you think about it, tow truck drivers see everything that the first responders see, and they have no training for that, and they have no chaplains. And if you start looking, just do some research. Two groups that have high suicide rates and chemical dependency rates, veterinarians. They had the highest suicide rate per group last year in the nation of professionals, veterinarians. And why? Because we had a lot of people who during COVID were closed in, and so they bought animals. You've got a lot of homeless people who have animals. It's their prime relationship. And so a lot of people needing the oxytocin, the bonding hormone, not even knowing that's what they needed, bought companion animals. Many of those people on lower incomes. And so what we found is that the veterinarians have an assumption placed upon them by people that, well, they just have deep pockets and you're going to take your animal in there, they're going to save them and not charge you a lot. But they actually have to go to medical school and pay for a business license and all the other things, you know, x-ray machines and stuff like that. So what we found is, just like in a lot of the healthcare profession, especially for us in the Pacific Northwest, we're way understaffed. We had a lot of people who left because, you know, they weren't going to comply with certain mandates. And so medical care is hard, but veterinary care is just as hard. So if you look around the nation, you're going to see they deal with a lot of trauma. They deal with a lot of assault by their customers, and I mean verbal assault typically, that they're no good, money grubbing, you know, why wouldn't you save my dog? Don't you think my dog or my cat's life matters? So veterinarians, highest suicide rate in the profession last year in the United States. That's a pretty shocking statistic, right? Well, tow truck drivers, spend a little bit of time with tow truck drivers. And you think about this. They're on the scene, they see it. But then the vehicles often get taken to the tow truck impound yard. And somebody has died in the vehicle, and if, in different states, just depends on what state you're in, or even counties, if a body has been ruptured, so there's body fluid inside of it, some of those places, they don't let you enter that vehicle again. So depending on where you're at, they might demand that it be incinerated. Okay? So your loved one's possessions are in the car, you go to the tow yard, you want to get them out, and they say, I'm sorry, by state law, you can't come into the vehicle, I can't give you those items. No, I can't let you see the vehicle because it's under investigation. And who gets verbally assaulted? By grieving people that they want to help. So just think about that. Maybe out of this training, you're going to say, one of the pathways that has been a passion of mine, I really need to talk to HCMA and say, can we make a pathway for that? Or find the place that you can serve and do those things. Which means now you're the planning body. You're the one who receives the calls. You're the one who will have to decide, is this going to be you flying solo forever? Hopefully not. Or are you going to bring other people into the team? Are you going to help format calls and get people out to the calls? So that's what this course is going to do for you, I hope. And some of you, again, you probably have way more strategic training than I do, but I'm going to share with you the way we do it. So the first things I want to say is start with assessment. Whenever you get a call or call out, I never just respond. My answer is never just, oh yeah, we're coming. My answer is, I'm going to do an intake. So I'm going to start asking some questions. Oh, thank you so much for calling us. Yes, we could absolutely do something. Let's talk about that first and see what's the appropriate response. And now I'm going to ask questions. How many people were involved? When did this occur? And I've had chaplain calls where people call me and I think they're talking about the same day event and then they say it was 3 weeks ago. Well, my response is totally different, but they don't tell you that. You have to do a little arm wrestling. So even on the intake side of it, you're going to have to ask some questions. When did it happen? How many people are involved? What are the responses that you're seeing in the people? That is the big one. That's the biggest of all the big ones. What is the responses that you're seeing in the people? So a law enforcement agency calls me and says, hey, we just went through this. We got some officers that are struggling. It's pretty powerful. Okay. How many officers? Oh, there's probably 2 of them or 12 of them. Now I'm getting some idea about what my team might have to look like, right? What are the responses you're seeing? Like I told you earlier with the 3-year-old who was violently murdered and officers sitting on the curb with their head in their hands and rocking. That's a pretty powerful response. We are definitely having a crisis response. I'm going to show up. They're refusing to talk about it and they're just going back to duty. Are they still on duty? Yeah. When will they be off duty? So I want to start finding some pieces out. That's an intake. So never just respond. Sometimes responding is the wrong thing to do. We always use in Texas, you remember the big chemical plant explosion? Like some people would say, oh my gosh, there was a chemical plant explosion. We should send chaplains. The fire department has to be devastated. And actually what fire departments reported was, it was the coolest thing ever. You should have seen it, man. There were windows blown from, but nobody died. Nobody died. But stuff blew up, man. Cool. The response they're having is exhilaration. They don't need a chaplain. They need a s'more stick and some chaplain. Yeah. So make your assessment because not everybody responds the same way to traumatic events. Some people get a hangnail and it's an end-of-life situation. And other people, honestly, like even with the 3-year-old I was telling you violently murdered, I was on scene, I got to process that for weeks. It really didn't impact me. I've been on other ones where, a 90-year-old lady dies and her husband's there, and I'm a mess afterwards. It takes me days to recover. You never know. You just don't know. So you have to ask. You have to find out what are the responses that people are having. They're having a tough time isn't enough for me. I want to know, how do you see that manifesting so that I can figure some stuff out. So there's an assessment done on the phone. Oftentimes I'd say you actually need to go to the scene too before you start. So you're going to get one version of the truth in your intake. Then you're going to go to the scene and you're going to get another updated version of the truth, which will be slightly different than the first version of the truth you got if you ask other people. And so you need to take some time and actually figure out what's going on. Don't just jump in. If you have a counselor and you show up to the first counseling session and they actually start counseling you, they've done a poor job. Their very first session should be an intake. They need to figure out what's the framework, what's the backdrop, what's the background that we're talking on. Because I did a premarital counseling for a couple and we were like 3 or 4 days, or 3 or 4 times into the premarital counseling and something just, it wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it, and they weren't giving me the information. And then all of a sudden, in like the 4th one, she said, yeah, and so he'll call me sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning because he can't sleep. And I'm like, frequently? Yeah, he's got PTSD. And I'm like, well, that probably would have been a start. And I'm like, how often do you wake up? Well, every night. How do you wake up? Screaming and yelling. Well, we should probably work with that, right? Because this is going to impact a relationship. But without the intake, without trying to get those pieces, you can spend a lot of time working on the wrong problem. So make sure that you assess on the intake on the phone. Is that you? Who does that? I just want you to ask yourself that. Who does that for you? Like in our team originally, I did all the intakes. And so I got pretty good at it, but nobody else did. And I kind of hogged it a little bit because I didn't because I didn't trust microphones. And so, so I would hog it a little bit, and then I had to learn to let my team do it, and my team got pretty good at doing intakes and trying to evaluate what was really going on. So I would say to you too, who does that? If you do the intake, you're going to do a verbal probably on the phone, but when you get to the scene, assess the scene again. And if there is no crisis response going on in people, don't do anything. You can loiter with intent, which I encourage you to do, but don't interrupt operations, especially if you're working with emergency personnel. If emergency personnel are crying or they're having difficulties, they're not going to die from crying. Leave them alone if they're still operational. It better be a really, really good reason that you would interrupt ongoing operations as a chaplain on scene loitering with intent. And I mean you better have a good reason. It might be your last time ever on the scene if you interrupt ongoing operations. Okay? So know who your incident commander are. We're going to come back to that in a minute, and pay attention. But if there's nothing going on, then don't do anything. Loiter with intent, don't do anything. After surveillance, after you've been there for a bit, you've talked to a few people in a few little nonchalant conversations. Yeah, it looks like you guys have been here for a while. Yeah, about 6 hours. Tuck that away, 6 hours. Yeah, you guys got any meals or anything? How you doing that way? You're starting to figure out pieces. Yeah, who do you think's, who's struggling here? Is anybody struggling here? It's just kind of day in life. Oh, it's day in life. Okay. Or tuck away what they say. So you're going to do your surveillance, and then you're going to determine your level of plan. But it's all surveillance first. You got to get your intake. You got to get on the scene. Don't take your whole team to the scene. If I'm doing intake, it's me. I go. One person. I'm going to listen to some conversations, and usually within less than 30 minutes, I can kind of sum up what's really going on, or maybe even what they don't know is going on yet. And then I'm going to start my planning at that point. We're going to talk about the planning part. That's the thing we're going to do. And I'm going to say planning happens on small scale all the time. I mean, you do planning even with a one-on-one. I hope you do. You're going to talk with one person who's been negatively impacted by a powerful event. You plan. But what we're going to spend the time on is larger groups. Groups that have been impacted by a powerful event, and how you need to do some planning, both as a way to relieve their stress and a way to determine what interventions you're going to do from that point. Okay, and we'll talk both sides of that. I would say on teams, and I'm going to talk CISM teams, trauma teams. We have chaplains. Most of our trauma team is chaplains, but not all of them are. Some are just trained in trauma intervention or psychological first aid. So in our team, as I'm looking around in the team, again, originally, they're just me who did this. And it got very busy, and I got very tired. So do you do that? Are you able to look at a complex, ongoing situation and determine for your team and for the individuals there, who's going to serve and who are they going to serve and what are they going to do? If you haven't done that, hopefully by the time you're done, you're going to really enjoy it, because we're going to do quite a few role play pieces here, and I know people love role plays, so this will be super. If we don't have somebody who does that, here's some of the things that can occur. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's got some ideas. You can choose the wrong interventions if you don't do the right assessment. So I'm going to give you the basics of 3 types of interventions we do with people. We do one-on-ones, one-on-one conversation. We do informational group, where, like, say a group of you, we were all just here and we experienced something powerful, but you guys didn't know each other. You just met. We were all on a train. We got in a wreck. You didn't know each other prior to the event. I'm not going to try to have an interactive conversation with you. I don't know that you should bond or come together. What I am going to do is give you an informational crisis briefing. I'm going to help you figure out some things you might or might not experience. I'm going to help you figure out ways to work through some of the responses that come, give you some anticipatory guidance, help you learn how to communicate with others here and family members. I'm going to give you some self-care things, and then I'm going to give you a handout that tells you everything I just told you, so that your trauma brain, when it forgets, has the spark to go back to it. And then I'm going to send you away like 20 or 30 minutes later, right? And then I have a third type. So I have individual, I have group informational, and then I have group interactive. So let's say this group over here, they all know each other, and somebody came into the room with a knife. and threatened to kill everybody and held them hostage for a couple hours, and they've all been traumatized, but they know each other. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to process this group together because they know each other, and we're going to equalize information. We're going to get what the real story is, all the perspectives. I'm going to restore unit cohesion so they can support each other when I'm gone. Because I'm not here forever. I'm a short-term surrogate relationship in their life, but their real relationship is right there. And then I'm going to help them figure out, again, the same things we did in the informational group. Okay? And if it's a hospital or if it's a law enforcement, I'm going to restore performance. I'm going to help them to determine if I can get them back on duty, if they can go back to work safely and function safely, or if I need to take a very drastic step, because I very rarely pull people offline. But if I needed to, then I would make that assessment and do that too. So 3 types of groups. I just want you to remember that. One-on-one, informational groups, and interactive groups. And if you remember those types, when you get more of the training, or if you've already had the training and you know those CISM type trainings, or I'm sure Red Cross's variable is pretty similar too, I would say that you're going to be really well prepared. But the question is, what intervention do you do? If I don't do assessment, I won't know if the group is homogeneous or heterogeneous. I won't know if they have a shared pre-existing incident relationship, if I should put them back together or if I shouldn't. I've got to really kind of dig. I need to find out, is there somebody in that group that is so traumatized by the event that keep putting them in a group would be a mistake? So here's an example. I get called up the gorge. We have a beautiful drive in the Columbia River Gorge. And an ambulance and fire department, 911 dispatch, and the state patrol get called to a car accident where there's a bunch of kids in a minivan. And they had obviously been drinking. And they hit a tree so hard that law enforcement searched quite a while for a second vehicle, because it rolled over and crashed so hard that they thought there had to be a second vehicle. So all of them show up on the scene, and the one who's in the worst possible condition is the passenger in the front seat. And her gray matter is exposed. I mean, she is not okay. Like, she did not survive the scene. But the volunteer fire department, one of the firemen who got in there, and these are all kids in their early 20s, guys and gals. He gets in, he's working on her because he's, the EMT. So high visual and a lot of emotional, relational stuff. I have to make that assessment before I can even do that group. I've got to know, should he be in this or not? And so he got there, we delayed the group, and I said, can you and I go on a walk? And we went on a walk and we talked. You got to do that. So somebody has got to make the assessment and determine, or you could do the wrong intervention or the wrong group of people, okay? You can also have a loss of opportunity to use multiple interventions when warranted. And I will always tell you, when you get an opportunity to do multiple interventions in one scenario, you should do it, because more help is better. And I will show you what that looks like, again, with our example in just a second. You have missed opportunity to use planning to reduce stress of impacted group. Because when I look at a group, and we're going to come back to this in about 2 minutes, the first thing I'm doing, once I hear the scene, I start to think of the theme. What will be the themes of this situation? For example, we were talking about this earlier, nursing staff, true story, new administrative group came in and took over the hospital, and they said all the nurses and doctors are going to change their name tags. We want them to have first and last name. And the nurses said, absolutely not. And if you've been in nursing at all, you know why. Nurses get assaulted. They get injured even by patients who they're trying to help. So they could not get out of that. And the administrator said, nope, you're going to do it or you're fired. So they did it. One of the nurses got tracked home, raped, and murdered. So now you get called to this scene to help out in the hospital. And I want you to think about this for a minute. Some of you already know the answer because we talked. But think about this. What would be the themes you would expect to hear from that group? Anybody want to chime in on that at all? Feel free.
Revenge.
Revenge might be one, yeah.
Anger.
Yeah.
It's your own fault.
I told you so.
I told you so. Mistrust. We don't trust. Am I going to keep my job? Am I staying here? Could I ever trust these people again? Moving, packing. I mean, think about all the things that are on top of grieving. So if I think about the theme before I go to the scene, what's going to give me a chance to do is start to prepare how am I going to deal with some of the things that I anticipate hearing based on the theme. And if we don't go through and do the assessment, if we don't talk to people, if we don't get an understanding of what's really going on, then we can come with some basic tools, but we're not going to probably come with the tools that are specific to the things they're going to ask us. But if I can think in advance about, okay, these are the things we would expect to hear based on the nature of the themes that should come up, then I can start preparing in advance about how we might deal with some of those, how we might work through that. And if I'm taking a whole team, I want my whole team on the same page. When I do the call out, my team always gets at least a half pages of notes, usually a full page. We meet somewhere close to the scene, we read through the notes, and then we get to business. And I've already determined what we're doing. I tell them the themes, I tell them how we're dividing up. I set up my team to win. I want them to win. I want them to have a great experience, and I want the people that they work with to know that they've been helped and are feeling some sense of recovery to adaptive function. They can go back, even if uncomfortable, get back to life. Even if struggling, get back to tasks. Still grieving, we're not fixing them. We're just trying to restore their adaptive functioning so they can get back to being who they are, get some of their power back. So think about that. Is that you? Would you like it to be you? And I hope so, because I think each one of us can do a good job at getting this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a scenario now, real life scenario, and I'm going to do the 5 T's, and you see them in your notes. That comes from the ICISF. They're not exclusive to that. That's one group. That's how they do it. But I know a lot of planning groups, emergency operations centers, a lot of groups do different levels of how they're going to process the scene. So what I am going to tell you why we're doing this is I want you to know that you're going to go through all of those, but I'm going to give you some cheater steps as we do this. The first thing is, don't try to do multiple of these at the same time. So if you look at them, I put them in an order. Themes, targets, types, timing, and team. The first two can be reversed. It can be targets and themes, because in a large scenario, you might have different groups of people who have different themes. Okay? You can do either one. You can do the themes first or the targets first. The other ones do in order if you're going to use this system effectively. So types, timing, and team. So themes are just what we talked about. What is the theme that's going on? How do I expect them to be impacted, and what do I expect to hear by the impacts they've had from the event? Okay? The next thing then is the targets. Who are the people that I might need to do interventions for? And not just individually, but by groups. If I listen to a bigger case scenario, what might these groups of people look like? How should I divide them up, and who should I look at as being the most important for getting stuff? This is going to come down to types of interventions. Now that I know my targets, and I know the themes, I'm going to try to figure out what types of interventions they might need. Are they going to need one-on-ones? Are they going to need informational group interventions or interactive group interventions? And when I figure that out, I start just putting them right next to each one of those groups. And then finally, we're going to come, or not finally, sorry, one away, we're going to do timing. When do they need it? So I've got my different groups, and I might say this group, Group A, needs something right now. Really intense for them, we should get to them right now. And there are going to be people who are in the right now, within the first 24 hours, and after 24 hours. And that's how I'm going to scale out an event like this. I'm going to break it up in that way. Right now, as soon as we possibly can, within the first 24 hours, and within time after the 24 hours. And then team. Who am I going to send from my team? I told you about the EOC call, or Early Childhood, ECE. When I took a team, I have 2 people on my team that are taller than 6'5". They're big boys. Do I take them with 3- and 4-year-olds? Well, you could say, well, they're going to be really fun if they're gentle guys. They're like giants, and everybody will be, like kindergarten cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm like, this could be cool. Or you could say, well, that'll be really intimidating. If it's a sexual assault like I talked about with the nurse and the staff, do I take an all-male team? Probably not. I'm going to try to grab the ladies who I can grab. If I have a lady on my team who I know has been a sexual assault survivor and that's not where she stands, well, I'll probably have her not come to that event. So you've got to know your team, you've got to know your players, because now it's time for you to select who's going to do what. Okay? So here's how I want to do this. I'm going to give you a scenario, then I'm going to pencil it out, then I'm going to give you a scenario and have you break up into groups and pencil it out. So I say that because you want to pay attention. So I get called by a church, and I told you this briefly. I'll give you the full scenario now. So I get called by a church that's just, they're 20, 25 minutes away from us. And they were out at the Columbia River and a tributary of calm water. Columbia River is raging. They walk out into their knees, they're standing out there, and they are having a good time. And what they didn't know was that the dam decided they needed to release a lot of water, undermined the shelf they were standing on, and about 6 of them got swept into the Columbia River. So here's the call I get. It's about 12:30 at night, and it's from a chaplain who actually is a 911 chaplain, but goes to that church, and his grandson was there at the event, and he calls me and says, hey, we're out at the scene, we're transporting, there were like 15 kids and 7 adults, we're transporting them back, the youth pastor and a 10-year-old boy died. I said, okay, so what can I do to help you? And he said, well, this is the church. I happened to find out my cousin had just become the youth pastor there. So he didn't know they were calling me, and I didn't know he was there, so it was kind of an interesting thing. And they said, well, we're just wondering if tomorrow you can help us try to sort through this and take over the interventions parts, because I do the CISM, they do the on-scene call, they're bringing them back. And I said, okay, what time do you think you're going to get them back? Because I don't want to get them there too early. They're going to need to go home and try to have a semblance of normalcy, even though they probably are not going to. They're going to be exhausted. And what time do you think you'll have them back? How many are there with you now? Who is working with the parents of the 10-year-old whose body was not found yet? They couldn't find his body. Who is working with the spouse of the youth pastor who drowned? So we tried to get some of those basics, and I said, okay, here's what I can do for you. I can do a few things. I can coach you guys and counsel you guys as to what to do from here, and I can help them that way. I can join and kind of serve under you and maybe make some advice, or I could come and help you guys plan and just take over. Think about that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. You've got to tell me what you want me to do. So we agreed to meet with the staff, the elder board, who also was in charge of insurance and all those pieces, and several of the leadership, because this is a pretty big group of people, and say, okay, you decide who you think needs to be there, who are your decision makers, who are the people that need to be invested in this. And we'll meet at 10. So we met at 10 o'clock, and again, I said to them, I am very sorry. I realize this is quite a bit of a challenge, and many of your brains are probably pretty tired thinking about it. Do I have anybody here who was actually at the incident? And I had 3 staff members who were at the incident. I said, I actually don't know that it's the best thing that you're here today, but I will talk with you today. Maybe we should let you go get some rest. So they left, which was great. We did have some other staff with the junior high school ministry who came and listened because they could give input. And then I said, okay, here's what I had offered last night. I know this is challenging for you guys. I don't know how equipped you feel to do this. I can come in and just give some advice and leave. I could stay around and kind of integrate in with your team and help you. Or I can take over on the planning part and the response part. It's really up to you, and I don't want to do what you don't want me to do. I'm here to serve you. And we kind of got a unanimous, you take it. We don't do this. And the senior pastor's like, I don't do trauma stuff. I don't like those normally. I really don't know what to do here, and the youth pastor was my best friend. I said, okay, so let's do this. I need you guys for about an hour to an hour and a half, and I'm going to kind of interview you. And I need information that I don't have, that only you have. You're the keepers of it. And so it's going to be about an hour and a half of us meeting here pretty informally, but I'm going to ask questions and hopefully you'll answer it. And at the end, what I plan to give you is a strategic plan of what's going to be done, when it's going to be done, who it's going to be done for, and who's going to do it. Would that help you? And they're like, well, yes, because what are their minds doing? What do we do? I don't want to hurt them. I don't know. I'm not one of those strange people that talks about death, dying, murder, rape, killing, torture. I don't do that. We need the strange people. So the strange people came and we said, yes, we got it. So then this is the process that we started. We'll expedite this quite a bit. I'd say, hey, here's what I want to first ask you, is I'm going to need to figure out who we need to help. And I'm going to make a list down the side here. And I need to break them up pretty specifically. Like, let me give you an example. Even last night you told me that there were 7 leaders and 15 kids. And I can't even remember if those numbers are right, but they're very close. You could say the group who was on the trip, but that wouldn't be a really good picture, right? If you told me 7 leaders and 15 kids, then I would start to have a differentiation. And then I might even break that out further. But I want to break it out into groups that you think are groups or individuals who might need assistance. So let's just talk about that. So let's think of some of the things that they would put up on that list. Well, we had, they said church staff. So I said, okay, church staff. Okay, great. Should we divide that up any further, or do you believe it should all stay the same? They said, no, all the same. We're a really tight-knit staff. We do things together continuously. We're like a family. Sold. You sold me on that. Okay. Who else? Well, the 7 adults who were there, right? Okay. Who else? Well, the 15 kids. Okay. Who else? Their parents. Yeah, parents. That's a good one, right? Yeah. And I said, now, do you want to divide parents up? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, are these the only parents in your youth group? They said, no. So are you going to deal with the other parents in the youth group? And they're like, well, we're going to have to. And I'm like, I think you're absolutely right. So let's talk about how you would divide them up. And they would say, parents of the kids who were there, right? There. And rest of youth group. And I said, rest of youth group, do you do your high school, junior high, and all those together? They're like, yep, junior high and high school do it all together. Elementary does not. And we think that what we're looking at representatively is more at the junior high, although we had some younger kids involved here too. I said, well, how about we do both groups, so it's just do them separately? Oh, good idea. So, okay, rest of youth group, and then we would go rest of junior high, high school. Whoop, that's uglier. In high school, okay. And then other youth. Okay, so now we're starting to divide the groups up, right? Okay. What about all the rest of so this is all the parents of these different groups. And then we're going to come down and we're going to talk about the rest of the kids from these groups, right? So now I have kids, and it's the same thing. I got that group, I got that group, and I got that group of these up above, right? And you can just keep going down through the list. Any questions so far? But it's my job to try to start working that out. As they give me information, I need to try to figure out what's going on. Well, this was COVID. So they had like 37 kids on the list. And they were told that they didn't have to wear masks. And then at the last minute, they were told they had to wear masks. And so all but 15 kids dropped out of the thing. So now, what would you think might be a theme that could come up with some of the kids who weren't there because of the mask thing? What are the themes?
Guilt.
Guilt? If I was there, I might have been able to do something. Anything else?
That survivor, so they did.
The what?
Kind of the survivor, although they weren't there, they still have that.
Yeah.
If I'd gone, would I have lived or not?
Yeah, would I have lived or not? Questions about their own mortality now come into issue, right?
Money or
So-
resources?
You what?
Money or resources? How am I going to pay for it?
Yeah, I mean, those things can certainly come up too. So you just think, what are going to be the most common themes that you're going to hear from these kids that weren't there? I could have died, or I could have helped. I mean, this could have been me. So I got the targets, but you know what? I need to back up because I left out a step. And this isn't the 5 Ds. I let them tell me their story. So, because I had to hear the story of the group. So pretend I haven't done this yet. Okay. So when I got in this group of people, I said it's going to take a while, but the first thing I need to know is I actually need to know what happened. Does somebody feel like they want to narrate and give me the narrative of what took place? And does anybody want to leave the room? And everybody wanted to stay, and they went through the narrative, and I said, does anybody have a piece to add to that puzzle? So we, instead of doing like an intervention, we went around, but we equalized information, and it gave me an opportunity to think about ways I would divide the group up first. So I did the narrative first, by the way. Sorry I left that out. Narrative with them, then we started doing targets. When we got through the list of all the different target groups of people, then we started thinking about what we were going to do. And I said, listen, this is what I want to do now. you've given me these groups, and this is a cheater, by the way, so I didn't do anything else yet. I'm gonna now go number 1, 2, because it's harder to do this way, you'll see. 4, oh, no, that 4 doesn't belong there because it gets divided down here. It's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you could go on to the wife of the youth pastor, you could go on to the family of the kid who drowned. Several of the kids were saved. By the way, one of the dads was a triathlete. And when the kids got swept in, he jumped into the water. And he said, I'm a triathlete, I do this all the time. I could not keep up. I didn't think I could get back to shore. I was able to push one kid up immediately. Somebody grabbed him and sucked him up on the remaining part of the bar. And I went after another child, and I did not think I was going to get back. And then I saw this one boy, Andy, floating. And I went out, and his was these 7 adults. I've got one adult who's really traumatized. He held a kid and had to let go of him, right? And they didn't find his body for like 2 days. And then the youth pastor jumped in to try to save a couple other kids. And he got swept out past one of the kids. The kid he was going after got pulled out of the water by a kite boarder, because we have kite boarders here. The kite boarder did CPR on the kid on his kite board and saved him, saved his life. So that was kind of cool. So 6 kids in the water, 1 youth pastor died, one kid died, and one of those adults got in the water and had to face his own mortality and let go of a drowning kid. So you kind of go through the list, and I'm starting to get the feel of where they're at. And I'm going to, I could go down this list for a long time, but for the point of this exercise, let's not do that just for time. My next job now is to draw a target. And now I'm dealing with where they belong on that target. Do I need to get to them now, in the first 24 hours, or after the first 24 hours? Okay? And so now it is my job to try to determine where I put these individuals on the target. Who's the group who needs the most right now? So I ask you that question. Which number is number 1?
The adults that tried to save the kids would be from one target.
Okay, so in this target, I'm going to put them first. Let's just put them for an example. Now I'm going to pull away, and I'm going to say, who's the person or group that should be the farthest out on the target? Like if we couldn't get to anybody, they just might have to wait for a bit. The kids that weren't there. Okay, so let's see, that would be, because this was the parents of those kids, so it'd be 9. Right, so, yeah, rest of junior hires who weren't there, so yeah, it'd be 8, 7, 8, 9, okay, 7, 8, 9, okay. So the reason I do this, and this is really important, when I first started doing this, I would ask who's first, who's second, who's third. Really compassionate people clump everybody in the center. Yeah. And you can't differentiate. So start on your who needs it the most, and then immediately move to who needs probably the least right now. Who could we delay? And the truth of the matter is sometimes this list can outgrow your team and your resources.
Totally.
And there are going to be some people sometimes that you just do not get to at all. You can't. And so what you want to do is make sure that you differentiate. It's just a real world, right? Everybody on my team is a volunteer. There's not a paid person on it. I'm not paid. I'm a volunteer. So we all have jobs and things we have to do too. So you want to get the first one in the center, then you want to go all the way out to the edges. You want to get out here. Okay? It's going to be really important to do that, and then go back through and start to put them on. But you create a scale for them by doing that. Really important. Once we do that, we're starting to figure out timing and our what we're going to do for interventions or types. And so at this point, I'll say, okay, so number 2, I see them here in the middle of the scale. What do we need to do for these adults? You guys tell me you know your people better than I know your people. So here's the 7 adults who are out here. There were 8, now there's 7. You tell me this one is the triathlete swimmer who was out there and helped the boy. Knowing your group, is he going to traumatize the group more if I talk with the group together? Or do I need to leave him in the group because he'll feel excluded from the group if he's not there? He'll be an island to himself. And they said, no, they have to all be together. They do these things together. And they started to tell me about some of the dynamics and personalities of this group. And I said, okay, so I know what I need to do here. We're going to do a CISD. I'm going to get a different colored pen, although I keep making a mess. And I do use multiple color pens for each part so they're easy to differentiate, especially because they don't speak my language, right? So I'm going to come back through and I'm going to put CISD, which is critical incident stress debriefing. It's like an 1.5 to 2 hour crisis conversation We go around the room. It's the most in-depth thing we do. And I said, knowing what you're telling me, and they're in the center, I want to do this today. But I have to have all of them. I can't have some of them or most of them. I have to have all of them. Can you get me all of them today? They said, yes. I said, how soon? 2 hours. Good. 2 hours. Find me a room that's private, and I will meet with them. Okay, who's next? Well, the kids came next, obviously. And I said, okay, so can you get me all those kids? I can't have some of the kids. I have to have all the kids. Same reason. If they all log, but 1 or 2 kids are not there, well, what are they going to feel? I have no connection. I didn't get any healing. I don't know how to talk to you about something that happened with you that I wasn't there for. But I was at this terrible event. And the youth pastor, who's my cousin, said, yes, I can get them all. I said, you can get 15 kids today? He's like, I can do it. I'm like, okay, so I need 2 hours here, so it'll be 4 hours later. So this one, we're going to do this at 12 o'clock today. Okay, get them here. Kids, okay, I'm going to do a CISD with this group of kids too. And we're going to do them at 2:30. Give me a little break so I can go to the bathroom and grab some water and a little overlap. And I'm going to have some more of my team here to do some one-on-ones. Okay? Great. And let's go to the next group of people. Oh, the parents are like, we've got to do something with the parents right now. I said, okay, so first thing, are you going to tell everybody in the church? Yes. How are you going to do it? We don't know. Can we write a letter? Yes. I said, great. When we're done with this, Pastor, could you sit with me and we'll write a letter together? And we sat and we wrote a letter together in about 5 minutes, and I sent it to the entire congregation. Why? Rumor control. Because if you don't tell them what's really going on, the rumors are, it's going to be, an axe murderer entered a cabin, and yeah, I mean, it'll get so out of control by the time you're done. So we wrote a letter, told them exactly what was happening, and we gave them the whole schedule, because we were done with it by then, of all the interventions. So the letter said, we're doing this with parents here, we're doing this with this, and this, and this, and this at this time, and this group here. We're really sorry, this is what happened. We wanted you to know that. And if you need any additional help, reach out to us. We have chaplains, we have trauma team here, we have our own pastoral staff. We constructed the letter and it went out. And somebody else took all of it and made charts. And I said, can you make charts and hang them around the church? Yep, they hung charts around the church so people could find stuff. So then I said, so parents, we probably need to talk to parents then pretty soon. They said, yeah. I said, how, you tell me, I don't know your people. How are your parents going to respond? They said, most of them are probably going to be really loving, but there's going to be some who want to blame everybody. I said, okay, so let's do this. Let's not have an interactive meeting with the parents. In other words, I'm not going to have a conversation with them. If you call me to a school and one child killed another child or some traumatic thing had happened, school shooting, and he said to me, hey, can you come to the school and help us with the response? We're going to hold an assembly. My first response is going to be, no, you're not. Not if I'm going to be there. All I need is one dissenter, and we have a gang-style war. We're not doing that. We will do the groups who are homogeneous groups. They have shared life experience. We'll put them together. We'll help them work together. And we will do informational stuff with people, but we're not doing it in a gymnasium. One dissenter turns the whole thing into a dumpster fire. So we don't do that. So it's my job to coach them. So I said to the parents, let's do an informational meeting. We call it a CMB. And my team will run it if you want, because if they're mad at us at the end of it, that's okay. They just can't be mad at you. This is where they live and go to church. So our informational meeting was run by our people, and we said right up front, hey, look, we know there's a lot of things going on. We don't have a lot of time. While we have a team meeting with these kids, we just wanted to talk with you. And so if you wouldn't mind, come on in and sit on down. And so actually, these kids came at 2 o'clock. The rest of this junior high school group that was youth, we had the rest of them come in at the same time the parents did. It was like 7 o'clock, and we did them together. So we had parents getting information, and we had kids being interactive. Because the kids were safe, the parents weren't necessarily, mama bear and papa bear when everything goes down. It can go down ugly, right? A lot of fear, a lot of pain, a lot of things. So we just started planning out this whole thing. Okay, what are we going to do next? Do you have a youth group on Wednesday? Yeah, let's do all the kids on Wednesday. We'll do some interactive things. We'll do some play therapy things with the younger. We'll have cards that we have the rest of the junior high and high school make for the families, and we'll work through it. So we just go through this. When it's done, then I say, okay, who's going to do what? And that's my job. They don't even need to know that. I'll, in a different color, write out the teams. Then we can create a chart. Does that make sense to you? Did I do that okay? I feel like I bounced back and forth a lot. I hope that wasn't super confusing. Yeah.
What does your CMB stand for?
So these, in the ICISF language, I told you there was going to be one-on-ones, informational groups, and interactive groups. This is an informational group, and it stands for Crisis Management Briefing. It's like a trauma town hall. Like I get together with everybody and give them information, but I don't have a conversation with them. I don't field questions, don't do any of that. I always have people around doing one-on-ones afterwards, so if they need to get some stuff out or ask some questions, they can. They just can't light the whole group on fire. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Your targets, what about the EMS and the police that are already there when you arrive?
Yeah, so for us, the chaplain agency that went to go help them come back did all the police and fire and EMS.
But if they weren't there?
Yeah, no, they weren't part of this meeting at all. Because this happened like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where we were at. So chaplain agencies dealt with that. We took on the church. That was our group. Okay,
What
yes?
about the parents of the child who died?
Yeah, so we actually had chaplains go directly to that family and chaplains go directly to the spouse and her kids who lost her dad, husband, dad. We did not bring them into the church. We went to them. They were in a whole different level than everybody else. Any other questions? Okay, good. Are you feeling awake?
Rob?
Liars.
Rob?
I got a whiplash injury, but I'm awake. Yeah.
How many chaplains were involved in the whole thing?
So for our team, on and off, I'm going to say there were probably somewhere between 12 and 15 of us worked this incident.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked this one for about 5 days in a row. So it was a lot of time on my side and maybe 2 others of us who really took on the brunt of the really intense interventions. And we did a ton of one-on-one interventions. We just made ourselves available and said, whenever you need us, we're here. And we did a lot of loitering with intent. We had a lot of hours and a lot of time. I'm going to say if you were to count man hours in the first week, gosh, we were probably 85 man hours. But we followed them for a year. So we did the grief following trauma stuff with them and took them all the way through the first anniversary and stuff too. So let me take you back now. So I've given you a basics, and I'm going to let you stumble and do your parts or nail it out of the park, whatever you want to do. But I want you to now to see the scenario, exercise number 1. I have a scenario for you here. I'll let your group read it together. And then you're going to do exercise 1. It says, or assignment number 2, don't bother with assignment number 2. Read the scenario, and then start to work on your own target, type, timing, theme, and team. Okay? What time was this class on? 3 o'clock? Okay, so I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to do that right now. So go ahead and break that. Brings a calm into the room. Somebody knows what they're doing. Somebody has an idea, and there's interventions for, I don't even know what they are, I just know somebody's doing them, and all I have to do is provide room, chairs, and water. And I think it's really important. So hopefully you're kind of getting that too. Yes?
You may think this is a silly question, but it's really bothering me.
Yeah.
What about Tim's family? No one's mentioning him.
We
They're all
had it.
mentioning
Yeah.
Heather, and I'm all worried about his parents
Yeah,
and his kids.
absolutely.
We had it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
did? Well, we did.
And some people probably pulled up Tim's family out of there too. And the truth of the matter is often when you get the intake, they're not going to tell you about Tim's family. You'll have to ask, so you're ahead of the curve. Don't be bothered by that at all. I think you thinking outside of the box is part of what
Well, I
it
know they
takes.
took him to the hospital, but I'm thinking,
Yeah? Does he have family?
yeah,
Do they want to know him?
yeah.
Will they be there? Will they be missing him? Sure, I think those are parts of the exercise. So these exercises, by the way, somebody in your team needs to get good at these because you need to have monthly meetings. You need to have 3 or 4 people that you're meeting with on a regular basis and doing role plays. Our team does 8 meetings a year. We take off June, July, and August because we live in the Pacific Northwest, and when the sun comes out, everybody's gone. So why bother? Just leave alone and don't fight it. And then we take off December. But we do a 2-hour meeting the other 8 months. And if you want to be on my team, you can be on my team. But if you want to go out on a call, you better be there at 7 of those 8 meetings, or I'm not calling you. Because this is how I assess your level of readiness. If you are good to send on kid-related calls, or law enforcement-related calls, or family calls, or whatever. This is how my team figures out if the rest of our team is ready. So I wrote this scenario, and it's not because I have a sick and twisted mind. It's because you've been on enough of these, you can write up a scenario, and what you're looking for is variables that people have to work with inside your scenario. But I do leave things out like that, and that's not even a shame when you write the scenarios either, because that makes people think. What I want you to catch, though, is that if we broke up in here and we had 8 groups, and in the 8 groups you rotated a person, and they went to a different group, and what they found was that the plans were similar, what does that tell you?
It's a good plan.
We're on the right track.
You're on the right track. You already know how to do this. You just have to more intentionally do it. So it's not like you're starting from zero because of your trauma experience, because of the education of who you are and the way that you've worked in different, you already do this. Do you do it formally? And do you do it together? And I think this might be, I throw in at least 2 of these type of exercises per year with our team where they have to do this strategic planning. And sometimes we do one on suicides, and sometimes we do one on CMBs, or the town hall briefing, and I give them a scenario. They break up in groups of 3, and they have to present a CMB, and each group presents a CMB. Or whatever ones it is, one-on-ones. So you get the idea. You've got to write scenarios and go through them, but if the scenarios miss some variables, then ask some questions and make it up on the fly. It's not a problem. But what I want you to catch from this, for the most part, is you actually did come up with pretty similar plans, which means you already know this. You don't need a ton more education. You just want to get the experience through either role plays or actually doing these. And if you do them a little bit weird, you'll make it up. You'll go, oh my gosh, we should have done this instead of that. Okay, well next time do that. But I bet you're okay. You just might have done something in a different priority. I would really suggest using the 5 T's and using this model. Just go through the T's. Figure out the themes, figure out your targets, figure out your timing, your type of your team, and work through them one piece at a time. And you could do that privately without the group you're supporting, but if the group is big and they're reeling, I think it really helps if they have it together enough to sit with them and do this with them, because at the end of it, they're going to go, oh, thank God somebody's here. And you're going to help. Okay? So, any other questions you have for me about the process besides the Tim's family? Anything else that you were thinking of or scratching your head or wondering because I didn't present it very well?
Well, we didn't talk a lot about what's her name, Heather either, and her family.
Yeah.
She's going to be experiencing a lot of guilt, and there may be some hatred toward her also, and her parents are, she's going to need some help.
Yeah, so Heather could come into play, and here's the part 2 on your team, and I do put it this order again from target to target, inside and outside, because Heather's parents might or might not make the target, even though they have a need. You might have to come back to your team and say, okay, my team is 2 people, and we hold full-time jobs, and we're looking at 17 other interventions, they might get cut. So I agree, Heather's family should be on the list for sure, and then once you put them on the target, you'll start deciding what are we going to do. Or do I call in, like mutual aid? We have mutual aid agreements, like Oregon Department of Corrections. We have a mutual aid agreement. I train all their trauma response, and they say, any training we're doing, you can come take it for free. And I'm like, yes, sign me up. So mutual aid might be, I call another chaplain agency and say, can you help me with the family? Or can you go to Heather's family? So that's why those relationships, those bridges matter.
In a real situation like that, if you had without having a fire, we don't know from this scenario.
Yeah.
Did the fire take out the whole business?
Yeah.
Did it affect any other businesses by fire?
Yeah.
Or were they affected because they couldn't get to their business because of police tape and all of that?
Yeah. This is why role plays, I think, are so important. Role plays are harder than real life. They just absolutely are. Role plays are more complicated because it's a fictitious scenario, and you don't have all those parts. If you roll up to the scene and you see crime tape, hopefully you're going to realize that you need to find incident command and ask some questions. but things become much more logical because all the pieces of the puzzle exist, and in a role play they don't. Don't let that stop you from doing role plays. I think it's really important we can get analysis paralysis. They're like, I don't want to write the role play because I'm going to forget something. Just write the role play. And if they say, well, did he have any family? Tim have family? Yeah. He lives with his mom and plays Nintendo all day. Oh, okay, great. Next question. So just wing it and have some fun with it. And
get a new mic.
I get the impression that I talk too long. So I would say wing it and have fun with it and just roll with it. Don't complicate things so hard. Hey, it always boggles my mind when I teach the 2-day courses and I'm like, okay, do a role play. And here's the scenario, and I give the scenario, with people on a train that got in a wreck. And naturally, there's somebody who just thinks it's their job to try to make it the most complicated possible scenario in case you meet somebody who lives in a coffin, drinks human blood, and I'm like, please. And I've had to say to groups, please. Oh, you gave me that for a reason. I have to say to people, please, don't make it stupid. Just don't make it stupid. Like, stay in the realm of reality and actually make it easy. So I'm begging you. Because literally I've said this and then people will go off and make it stupid. And I'm like, please, just don't do that. You weren't born in a cave, raised by wolves. No, just stay with reality and make it easy for them to score a win here. Because the truth of the matter is, I responded to hundreds and hundreds of calls, as many of you have. And even on complicated calls, I don't get the stupid stuff. Sometimes they put the scenarios. So if you're the person who always thinks that you should test everybody and make it as hard as you can, would you knock that off? Just please, for Lord Jesus, help them today, deliver them. Okay? So in the role plays, work with each other, make them work through real life, do that part. But it's important because your strategic planning will depend on your preparation. You can only rise to the level of your preparation. Yes?
Was one of the groups, was it mentioned that the women might need a group of their own at some point?
That the women. Of which scenario? That scenario?
That scenario.
Yeah.
Did
Did somebody in that group have that the women would need a group of their own?
We asked if there were women,
Yeah?
because we didn't know.
And the reason being because of the perpetrator stalking, sexual harassment.
To others,
Yeah?
and others may be afraid to report if it happens in the future.
Yeah, here's the part too, I think it's an opportunity. Yeah. So the way we typically deal with that is we do a lot of one-on-ones. And I would probably do a lot of assessment with her to figure that out. So we had a girl who was 18, brother 17, brother 15, daughter, another sister 13. And dad killed himself, killed grandma who lived in the house, and killed mom. He killed himself last, by the way, just the order's important. When we went through that, because she was going to adopt her siblings, and she did, it's a long story, I won't tell you the whole story. But at the end of that, one of the things we had to talk about is that these kids couldn't identify that they grew up in a domestic violence home. This was normal to them, right? So we couldn't tell them that, we had to get them to discover it. And they got to discover it, and then we had to talk with her in particular and say, look, I hate to tell you this, but in this world, predators will look for parents who have deceased of girls, and you're a pretty young lady, and you have been in a domestic violence relationship. You never have to be in one of these again. You can choose not to do that, and we'd love to help you. But I would also really encourage you not to date anybody you haven't previously known for the next couple of years. Let's not connect with new people that are handsome and have lots of money and want to do all kinds of things. And she's like, well, that sucks. I'm like, yeah, but it's a reality. And so it is a reality. So you do have to look for the themes like that and think about it. Who could be victimized and how do we protect them? So yeah, it's a great insight. And now when you bring that up in your group, if your whole group wasn't thinking about it, and that's why role plays are important, you just educated the entire group. Because now you have an experience. We were talking earlier with children. Somebody in your group now, if it's a child center, boom, pumps in, you all learn. You're like, whoa, never thought of that piece before. So your group will get better and better simply by the dynamics in your group going through the role plays. It's so important. So important. So again, a lot of law enforcement agencies, they have all the tools, they don't know how to use them because they don't have teams. And we go in and we say, let me create a team with you guys and help you do that. Okay, any other questions or comments on that? Oh my gosh, 2 minutes. Yeah.
Speaking for Red Cross.
I'm gonna make it real quick if I can, because I'm gonna close. Yeah.
For Red Cross, when they send teams out, no matter if it's for disaster spiritual care, as chaplains, or if it's in a shelter, or whatever it is, they usually send out male and female together, because a lot of times males won't talk to a female or vice versa.
Yeah. No, that's wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom in your team selection. It's one of those keys for that very reason. So, good insight. Okay, I am going to take you to page 2, and we're going to see if, when we are done, you can say, indeed, a miracle has happened here today. I am going to try to give you the truncated version of larger scale crisis response that you have the notes. Right? You got notes. Here's a good gift. This will be some light reading later on in your life. If you want to be involved domestically, because foreignly it's different, it's a different scene, but domestically, so in the United States somewhere here, in disaster response, and you haven't done it before, a few things I want to tell you. First of all, you're going to probably need to join a COAD. So a COAD is Community Organizations Active in Disaster. Every county has them, and they're all terrible until they've dealt with their first disaster. None of them function well. They have plans. Their plans are terrible. They don't work until they have their first disaster. Some of them have a COAD, and we'll forget to call the COAD at all, even in disaster, because they've never used them. Then they get really good after they've had a disaster or two. But you should call your 911 dispatch center and ask them who runs the COAD in your community, because they do. Usually 911 is charged with that. And then you join that and you go to the COAD meetings. Yeah?
Call the non-emergency number.
Yeah, please call the non-emergency. Thank you, I should have said that. Call the non-emergency, don't call 911. What is it, 311 now? Yeah, 311 is in our county for non-emergency. I don't know what yours is. But look them up, connect with them and ask them how you get involved with the COAD. And the COAD is the community level, like your county. If you have a major disaster that your county can't cover, they'll call the VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, which is the state level. So COAD is your county, VOAD is your state, and all the money from FEMA goes through the state. Yes?
Are you saying V as in Victor?
Victor, yeah. Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, but they're the ones who get the money from FEMA. So let's say that I want to start responding with 911 with my mobile response trailer, or I want to be somebody who's called when a disaster strikes and they need disaster mental health. What I need to do is get them registered with my state, which is Washington State Emergency Management. Put your state in there, it's emergency management. And you're going to need a sponsoring agency for yourself. So like for me, Clark County Sheriff, where I'm at, is my sponsoring agent for my team. So what we do is we have to take 3 FEMA courses, and I list them for you. ICS 100.C, ICS or IS 200C, IS 700B. They all take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. They're free courses. I've showed you in your notes how to get there at FEMA.org, and you'll get a student ID number. You can take them for free. They are like watching paint dry on a wall. Okay, unless you're wired this way, it's painful. But you need them. So you get them, and then you take a test right after watching it. Give yourself another 30 to 45 minutes. When you get those 3, then you go back to your sponsoring agency, and they then do a background check on you and submit your information to your state's emergency management. Then you will get a card from your state's emergency management, and really what you just did, the whole process of everything you just did, was get FEMA insurance. That's really what you did. You've learned some things too about incident command, which are really important, because you blow it on the scene, they won't let you come back. So you need to learn incident command, but the big piece of the puzzle is, now if I go out on a call, and I get dispatched from 911 to go show up with my mobile response trailer and the search and rescue guys take me to the top of the cliff and my trailer goes over, I call FEMA and they write me a check. And usually within 6 weeks, I will have a check. We had one guy tear out the oil pan under his car. He had a check within a week. Took it in, they paid the whole thing. One of your people dumpster dives there trying to get, the box they left there and breaks both their hips, FEMA's gonna pay the bills. And so the reason that you want that is from the minute you leave your home until you return to your home, you're covered. Why does law enforcement or EMS or fire care? Because they have more insurance than you personally do. So if you get injured on the site, it's gonna go after their resources. But if you have FEMA, they have more money, because you always go after the person with the deep pockets, right? You're covered by FEMA. And so now they have a freedom to call you and say, would you come onto the scene? Would you bring your meals or your chaplains or whatever it is you're going to do, because now you have FEMA coverage. And nobody's going after them because FEMA is going to pay the bill. FEMA loves writing checks, by the way. It's kind of what they do. It's kind of their part of the play. They write checks, right? They give a lot of money. They do some organization. They manage a lot of paperwork. Even in disaster cleanup, they hire 2 basic companies to come in and do the disaster cleanup. We're subcontractors. It's not FEMA that does it. They manage 2 different groups. Army Corps of Engineers, private company. They pair them, and they have another disaster relief cleanup. So you need to have a state emergency management number. Now that number, that ID will travel from state to state. It'll work in any state because you have a home state, because FEMA is federal. So get involved in your COAD if you want to do disaster work. A lot of it's just going to be organizational planning and stuff, but it's good for you to do. And then get through a supporting agency, whoever you work through, and get your state's emergency management part. What we have is we have a lot of people who are like, I'll wait for the disaster, and then I'll work on getting the stuff that I can to be involved. And I'm going to tell you that the reason the incident command system came up is because people, I'm way over my, can I have 2 more minutes?
Keep going.
Okay, 2 more minutes.
Yeah, keep going.
So if you showed up like 9/11, we had people that would show up to 9/11 and they would say, have a truck full of ladders. This is a true event. They said, I was called to bring more ladders to the pit, and the pit's where they're cleaning. And all of a sudden, they let him in because they got all the ladders. The guy apparently backed up, dumps all the ladders, and keeps driving. Nobody knows who he was. Nobody called him. Nobody asked him to be there. So what happened out of a lot of these disasters, starting with the Oklahoma City bombing and moving forward, we continued to create incident command or federalized systems that would get everybody under the same roof, everybody under the same incident command structure, breaking it up into 5 different categories of larger events. And so what you're going to find is there's a lot more accountability. Even school shootings, we used to open them up to counselors and everybody who would come to try to help. They don't let them in anymore. We've learned our lesson. You go through incident command, and who do they want? Trauma response teams. They do not want grief counselors. They're not in grief. We talked about that. They're in trauma. And so what they want is trauma response teams who can come in. So if you're going to try to do it when the disaster happens, first of all, everybody who would give you the credentials is too busy. If you want to do this, you better do it in advance. You have to prepare yourself in advance. And you might sit on that for years because there might not be a disaster in your area. Or you could choose to join a group who actually travels and goes on those disasters. But don't self-deploy. They'll turn you back. So that's my basic part there, and you can read the rest of the notes. But I will tell you, as far as psychological first aid goes, again, in disasters, your primary job is not to interfere with operations. You've got to meet with people afterwards. There's a lot of training on that. But I think I better stop talking. I've really enjoyed this time with you guys. Thank you for letting me do this. I hope it's been helpful. And